Well, she won 13,047 votes during early voting, some 4,000 more than former Mayor Sheila Dixon, who had 9,445. Pugh had never, ever won citywide. Dixon always won citywide. On election day, and in a very strange twist of events, Pugh won 33,000 votes to Dixon's 34,000 votes. So Pugh won early voting, but she lost on election day. As a Dixon supporter, I find the whole thing a huge mess. Oh, I failed to mention that there were over 1,800 voting irregularities. So many that our citizens group, ad hoc committee, if you will, voters organized for the integrity of city elections, led the way to raising questions about how the votes were gathered on election day. Then something happened that most have never seen: the decertification of Baltimore Board of Election numbers by the State Board of Elections. There were a plethora of issues, including poorly trained election judges, people voting using the wrong ballots, and people in the county voting in the city on a mayoral race. Sit down, son. Come on now, don't do that to me. Then there is the chain of custody issue. Did we not hear the Board of Elections Chief Armstead Jones state that he did not have keys? Where are the missing thumb drives? Where were the late thumb drives? Any way you shape it, the Baltimore City primary has more questions than answers. And I, for one, think the end result stinks something bad. Congressman Elijah Cummings has recently made a statement about the DOJ report, but he has said nothing about the legality of this Baltimore primary. Considering that he is a Pugh supporter, I'm not surprised. I just wonder, had Sheila Dixon or Larry Hogan conned people into voting for them with the promise of a job, whether Channel 11, Channel 13, and the Baltimore Sun, I think they would have broken their necks getting that story out to the masses. When it comes to the Election Day riot outside of Pugh's office, on the day before the one-year anniversary of Freddie Gray, this city, including Jane Miller, and all of the other award-winning journalists, well, quieter than a church mouse urinating on cotton. To her credit, Miller, the lead investigative reporter at WBAL TV 11, did tweet that there was something odd, that typically the winner of early voting wins the election day count also. This again leads one to have to question the validity of the early voting results, especially in a race with a difference of approximately 2,400 votes. In a city with over 500,000 people, the race boiled down to a mere 2,400 votes. So when I think of the 2,000 or so people who rioted in Walbrook Junction on election day, when I think of the lack of chain of custody accountability, when I think of the fact that neither the city nor the State Board of Elections can account for every single vote in a state dominated by the very people, black and white, who supported Pugh, when I think of the $600,000 loan to Pugh from former Baltimore County Executive Jim Smith to the tune of $600,000, and the fact that Pugh was $1 million in debt after the election compared to $5,000 that Sheila owed. Obviously, Sheila did a tremendous job in that respect. The whole entire Baltimore City primary election just seems like utter, I can't say that word on the air, nonsense. There's no wonder that there was not just a riot at Pew's office. It's a wonder the whole city didn't erupt in a riot. For me, this type of political game playing, which goes to the highest level of the Maryland Democratic Party, explains to me why locals rioted after the untimely death of Freddie Gray. People have seen the games before and are almost accustomed to getting shorts from local government. And it is downright shameful. The black elected officials who we assumed had our backs have proven to be middlemen for government-sanctioned regentrification at best. For 22 years now, I've been a voting advocate, always pushing people to vote. Get out there and vote, encouraging people, having political forums, trying to get people engaged. What do I tell people now? You know, all along say, come on, you got to vote. Oh, my vote don't matter. Now, they can say with emphasis, my vote doesn't matter. If it did count, then those in charge would act accordingly and respect this sacred process. A major political heist has occurred in broad daylight right before our lying eyes, and nobody is the wiser. All kinds of rules were broken in the primary, including political ads not being reported in a timely fashion. Some ads were actually reported by local cable stations on election day itself, yet there's no recourse whatsoever. So I went looking for some answers. One person I talked to was a DC-based political pundit, Marcus Murchison. Having been engaged in political affairs over the past 2 decades, I posed the question to him: can you procure a vote? Put differently, can you buy a vote with money, a promise of a $12 an hour job, or a chicken box? No, he said. That is voter fraud, and it is interfering with the people's right to vote. Trying to coerce a vote, it is illegal. You cannot do that, and there are penalties. Murchison and I have worked together for years, including work on the campaign of late Morehouse brother Terry Harrison down in Southeast D.C. I asked Delegate Cheryl Glenn, same question. Glenn is chair of the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland and has been engaged in politics most of her life in one way or another. Quote, "We couldn't even offer a hot dog," she said, referring to her work in the 80s with the City Union of Baltimore. It represented some 8,000 city employees. Quote, "We were advised that we could not give anybody anything in exchange for their vote. You cannot promise anything. The point is that it is better to avoid any and all types of actions so that one can never be confused with attempting to influence the vote." That's supposed to be a violation of election rules, said Glenn. Former Attorney General Doug Gansler told BMoreNews.com yesterday in an exclusive interview, quote, "It is a gray area." He did say, however, you cannot promise a job. This bungled, certified, recertified, decertified Baltimore City primary of 2016 has brought many election questions to the surface. The concept of walk-around money, the issue of quid pro quo, the issue of gifts for a vote, chain of custody issues, just to name a few. Gansler would not go all in, but did say that any actions that influence a vote beyond what is acceptable is unethical at some level, although it probably would not get a person in jail. East Baltimore's Kevin Parson was queried. Involved in elections since he was 8 years old, the 53-year-old Politico said, "It is my understanding," quote, "that the Baltimore Board of Election prohibits such behavior." He said the candidates should avoid anything that even remotely gives the impression of influencing an election. Charles Robinson, a 40-year veteran journalist, has been covering elections since 1974 when he graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University. I asked Robinson if a vote can be procured. He replied, "Procuring a vote is illegal." He added, "I can't pay you to get your vote. They can urge you to vote, but they cannot have quid pro quo." He referenced the 1920s when people were told if they voted, they could drink for free all day. He noted Chicago, Boston, and Philadelphia. He said that while it is not illegal to pay campaign workers, one cannot pay a person to vote. And that's exactly where the Pew campaign is. They can argue that these people were employees. However, on election day, these same people who were engaged, given a chicken box, and promised a $12 an hour job, taking the early voting, because remember, they cannot vote on election day if they are on the clock. Many of these people were dismissed. Many did not get paid. Pew told the television stations that they would pay all of the people the $100 as promised. We later learned that only some were paid, and they were paid $50 at that. This is all public. It was on television, but they had nothing to say about the Baltimore City primary. And that, my friends, is how the state of Maryland and the city of Baltimore gets down. There's no need for the president, the mayor, or anybody else to call Baltimoreans thugs as it relates to Freddie Gray. Frankly, the citizens have nothing on the elected officials. There's far too much blood on their hands. Further, how the State Board of Elections can certify an election where there is not 100% accountability is simply beyond me. I am reminded of Linda Lamone's reply. She runs the State Board of Elections. When asked about voters who could not be verified, she said, "I don't know." I'd like to welcome you to the Donnie Glover Show. We will take your calls, 410-481-1010. Got Angie in the studio. Glad she's safe. The show is brought to you by IZ Auto Body and Paint. IZ Auto Body and Paint. IZ Auto Body and Paint. All makes, all models, all repairs, fast service. We make your car look new again. Collision repair, framework, automotive paint jobs, free estimate, free towing with repair, rental cars, shuttle service available. And we pay your insurance deductibles. IZAutobody.com for 3023 Hamilton Avenue. 443-467-4889. 443-467-4889. 443-467-4889. IZAutobody.com. Do pick up a copy of Unapologetically Black. It's available at Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Everyone's Place on North Avenue, and of course, Simple Wellness Day Spa at 519 North Charles Street. Angie, put your plug in, dear heart.